There's a kind of loss that nobody prepares you for, not because it's rare, but because it doesn't look like loss. There's no funeral, no announcement, no moment where someone sits you down and says, "This person you loved is gone now." You can grieve. It just happens slowly. A conversation that used to last for hours now ends in minutes. A person who used to call you first now calls you last. A presence that once filled every room in your life now barely fills a text message. And you sit with that, quietly, wondering if you're being dramatic, wondering if you're imagining it, wondering if maybe you're the one who changed. Because they're still there, still breathing, still existing in the world. And yet, something between you has gone somewhere you can't find. This is the fear of losing someone you love, not the version that comes after death, the version that comes while they're still alive. And it might be the most disorienting pain a human being can carry. There is a kind of loss that nobody prepares you for, not because it's rare, but because it doesn't look like loss. There's no funeral, no announcement, no moment where someone sits you down and says, "This person you loved is gone now." You can grieve, and it just happens slowly. A conversation that used to last for hours now ends in minutes. A person who used to call you first now calls you last. A presence that once filled every room in your life now barely fills a text message. And you sit with that, quietly, wondering if you're being dramatic, wondering if you're imagining it, wondering if maybe you're the one who changed. Because they're still there, still breathing, still existing in the world. And yet, something between you has gone somewhere you can't find. This is the fear of losing someone you love, not the version that comes after death. The version that comes while they're still alive. And it might be the most disorienting pain a human being can carry. If you have ever loved an animal, you know something about this that people who haven't cannot fully understand. Picture this. You come home after the worst day you can remember. You don't have words for what you're feeling. You're not even sure you can hold a conversation. And the moment you open the door, something runs to you. Not because you're successful, not because you said the right thing, not because you performed well today, but simply because you exist. And your existence is the best thing that happened to them today. That is not a small thing. That is one of the purest forms of being seen that most humans ever experience. And the fear of losing that, not to death, but to age, to illness, to the slow disappearance of the animal that used to leap and now barely lifts its head. That fear is not about the animal. It's about what the animal showed you that you were. When a pet begins to fade, something in you begins to understand for the first time what it means to love something you cannot save. You can be present. You can be gentle. You can make every remaining moment count. But you cannot stop the clock. And in that helplessness, something cracks open in you that never fully closes. The pet is not just a pet. The pet was proof that you were capable of unconditional love. And when they go, even slowly, even gently, part of that proof goes with them. This is the first lesson loss teaches, that the pain is never really about what you're losing. It's about what you discovered you were capable of feeling. But that's only the first layer. The next one goes deeper. There is a specific moment that happens in most people's lives that nobody warns you about. You are with one of your parents, maybe at dinner, maybe on the phone, maybe watching them try to figure out something on their phone that you would solve in 3 seconds. And it hits you, suddenly and completely. That the person you spent your entire childhood believing was invincible is not invincible. That the hands that once seemed the safest place in the world are now slower. That the voice that used to know every answer now sometimes trails off mid-sentence. And something inside you rearranges itself permanently because you were built around a version of that person. Your sense of safety was constructed on the assumption that they would always be there, in that form, with that strength, in that role. And the moment you see them as human, fully, vulnerably human, the architecture of your inner world begins to shift. This is not grief. Not yet. This is the anticipation of grief. The shadow of a loss that hasn't arrived but is now impossible to pretend isn't coming. And here is what makes it so complicated. As your parents change, as they age, as they need you in ways they never did before, you may notice something unexpected. You miss them while they're standing right in front of you. You miss the version of them that made you feel like a child in the best possible sense. Protected, held, oriented, like the world had someone watching over it who knew what to do. And the fear underneath all of that is not really about them. It's about who you will be when the person who defined safety for you is no longer there to define it. You weren't just afraid of losing them. You were afraid of losing the version of yourself that only existed in their presence. This one is the quietest loss, the one with the least permission to hurt, because nobody talks about it. There are songs about romantic heartbreak. There are therapists for divorce. There are support groups for grief. But almost no one talks about what it feels like to watch a friendship dissolve slowly, without any fight, without any ending. Just a gradual distance that grows until one day you realize you can't remember the last real conversation you had. Think about someone who used to be essential to you, who knew the version of you that existed before you learned to be careful, who could sit across from you in silence and it wasn't empty, it was full, who you called when something happened before you even knew what you wanted to say about it. Now, think about where that person is in your life today. For some of you, they're still there. And that is a rare and precious thing. Hold on to it. But for many of you, there is someone coming to mind right now who used to occupy that space and doesn't anymore. Not because of a betrayal, not because of a fight, but because life moved you in different directions. And the thread between you got thinner until it became invisible. That is a grief that has no name in most languages. A loss with no ceremony. A wound with no visible scar. And what makes it hurt in a specific way is this: you still love them. You probably always will. But the version of them that matched the version of you that needed them, both of those versions are gone. And what remains is warmth with distance, which is its own particular kind of ache. The fear of losing a friend is not fear of losing a person. It's fear of losing the witness, the one who saw you when you were becoming. And without that witness, some of those versions of you feel like they never quite existed. If you are a parent, you already know what I'm about to say. And if you're not, stay with me, because this one touches something universal. From the moment a child is born, every act of good parenting is an act of preparing them to leave you. You teach them to walk so they can go somewhere without you. You teach them to speak so they can tell their own story without you in it. You teach them to be strong so the world doesn't break them when you're not there to catch them. And then, one day it works. They leave. They build something. They become someone. And you are standing at a doorway, watching them walk into a life that you helped build, but do not live in. This is one of the most profound paradoxes of love. The more fully you love a child, the more completely you work toward the moment when they no longer need you in the same way. Success as a parent looks like loss, and the fear underneath is not that they left. It's that you did your job, and now the role that gave your life one of its deepest meanings has changed forever. The child is still there. They love you. But the version of them that fit completely into the shape of your days is gone, and no one tells you how to mourn that, because it looks from the outside like everything went right. Here is what connects every loss we have spoken about today. The pet that saw you without conditions. The parent whose strength made the world feel survivable. The friend who witnessed you becoming. The child who needed you completely. In every case, what you feared losing was not just a being. It was a mirror. A specific reflection of yourself that only existed in relationship with them. When they change or fade or leave or grow, that reflection changes with them. And for a moment, sometimes a long moment, you don't know who you are without it. This is the real fear. Not of their absence, of your own, of the parts of yourself that feel like they only exist when someone you love is there to confirm them. And here is what I want to offer you, not as a solution, but as a different way to hold this. Every major spiritual and wisdom tradition that has ever existed, across every culture, every continent, every century, has pointed to the same truth in different languages, that there is something in you that cannot be lost because it was never given to you by another person. Something that exists before the relationships and after them. Something that the faiths of the world describe as a divine thread. A connection to a source that does not change, does not age, does not drift away, does not grow up and move out. Whatever you call that source, and each person's name for it belongs to them alone. The invitation is the same. To find the part of yourself that is anchored there rather than in the mirror of another person. Because the people you love are not your foundation. They are your companions on top of a foundation. And when they change, as everyone does, as everything does, the fear is survivable. If you are standing on something that doesn't change with them, you are not the reflection in their eyes. You were here before they saw you, and you will still be here when the reflection shifts. The fear of losing someone you love is real, and it is one of the most human things you can feel. But underneath it is an invitation to know yourself so deeply, to be so rooted in something beyond the mirror, that love becomes something you give freely, not something you cling to in order to survive. Because the deepest love is not the one that fears loss. It's the one that stays open even knowing that everything changes, and still chooses to love, fully, without armor. That is not the absence of fear. That is courage, and it lives in you already. Before you go, think of one person you didn't lose to death. You lost them to time, to distance, to change. Who is that person? Drop their first name in the comments. Just the name, nothing else. I'll read every single one. If this reached something you had no words for, subscribe. This is what we do here at the Phrase Decoder. We find the name for the thing you've been feeling. And sometimes that's enough.